The Committee on Military Veterans and Homeland Security will come to order. Mr. Clerk, good afternoon. Would you mind taking attendance?
Chair LaFave.
Here.
Representatives Beeler.
Here.
Eisen.
Here.
Bazat.
Here.
Martin. Jones.
Present.
Coleman.
Here.
Rogers.
Here.
Steenland.
Here.
Mr. Chair, a quorum of the committee is present.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. I need a motion to adopt the minutes of the March 23rd meeting. Vice Chair Jones, you make that motion? Without objection, the meeting minutes are approved.
And if you don't mind, the timing is really great.
Representative Martin is going to be with us on Zoom for a little bit. Representative, are you going to be able to make it for the vote?
He can't vote.
At later in the hour?
I'm shooting for that. Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we will defer voting on House Bill 4078 until later in the hour to give the good representative, or whatever acronym you want to use, the opportunity to come in and testify. So at this point, we're going to take a presentation about the concealed pistol licensing structure here in the state of Michigan. With us in person, we have Tom Lambert from Michigan Open Carry. Tom, welcome to join us up here. The legislative director, I believe. Tom also has written testimony and put in a card of support for House Bill 4078. And Mr. Clerk, I believe that is on the record from last time. Fantastic.
May
Tom,
I
please take it
commandeer the video from this laptop?
Great question.
Just unplug it and plug it in mine?
Right behind you, Shil.
Please come on up and help us if you don't mind.
What are you trying to show? A PowerPoint?
Just stuff I don't have a PowerPoint, just stuff I have pulled up already.
Okay, if I could get you to email it to...
I'll be able to do with no internet on this laptop.
Okay, shoot. Let me see. That
It's just
one.
HDMI, unplug, plug it in.
Yeah, it'll mess up our audio though when we ever wrap on Zoom, so...
I understand. Okay, I will email it afterwards.
Okay, let me see if I can get in touch with the video guys and see if they can come figure something out for you, okay?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
With our current pandemic, I appreciate all the work that IT has been doing. Been doing a great job trying to keep us as connected as possible, so thank you.
Lots of issues we all face every day with this kind of stuff. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for your time today. My name is Tom Lambert. I am the legislative director for Michigan Open Carry. Over the past 10 years, I've probably testified on firearm issues to the legislature more than any other individual. I've been very into this topic for quite a long time, not only as a personal interest, but my pedantic brain just really likes diving into the issues and finding all the nuances. And with Michigan's firearm law being so complex, there's a lot to dig into and a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. Today I have a presentation on Michigan's concealed pistol licensing scheme. I have for you here that I'll mail to the committee clerk after the meeting. First, I'd like to start off with a brief legislative history to give you an idea of where Michigan has come over the years. Michigan passed its first gun control bill in 1887 with Public Act 129. Whether you want to frame it, whether you want to burn it, it's really interesting history to me. It's one paragraph long on a single page that simply banned concealed pistols. No licenses permitted, very few exceptions for law enforcement, and that was it. In 1911, Michigan then passed another bill, 274 of 1911, that first created the gun boards. And it also created a license, but that license was only needed for counties of more than 100,000 people, which was only very few counties at that time. After that, we jump forward to 1925. Lots going on then, lots of racial strife, lots of gang violence. Michigan passed a comprehensive scheme at that time. Instead of small little measures, it was a great big measure that repealed everything prior to it. Again, there was a prohibition on concealed pistols, But there was a licensing scheme created with the county gun boards that allowed people to get licenses from their county gun boards to carry a concealed pistol. It also created what was then called pistol registration. Every single pistol had to be registered in order to be lawfully carried. Only 2 years and 1 week later, Michigan then enacted Public Act 372 of 1927. This act remains on the books today and is the basis for everything we have today. Rather than repealing and replacing, everything since then has been an amendment to Public Act 372. That registration I talked about was repealed, gun boards were tweaked, and they also added in a license to purchase a pistol. So in 1927, what they changed from the 1925 law is you had to be licensed before you could even acquire a pistol. You had to get that license from a local authority who made up the criteria on their own to decide who they would give licenses to. Back at that time, you can imagine the type of criteria that they came up with. The same also applied for then a concealed pistol license for anyone who wanted to carry that firearm outside the home. Throughout the years, that law remained substantially the same. Portions of it were pulled out of it into the Penal Code in 1931, and still exist in the Penal Code today. We jump forward all the way to the year 2000. With Public Act 381, this state enacted what we call shall issue. Effectively, if you apply for a license, as long as you meet the criteria, or put another way, you're not disqualified by something specifically listed, you are to get a concealed pistol license. That's what we enacted again in the year 2000. Jump forward then to 2015, only a few years ago, the state of Michigan repealed or got rid of those county gun boards. Even though we had enacted shall issue in 2000, a lot of county gun boards were in many ways still doing what they wanted to do and just not really following the law, which created an opposite effect of what was intended in 2000, that being one statewide standard. So with the repeal of the gun boards, we then have the scheme that we have today. And that leads me into, how do you get a concealed pistol license today? Michigan's concealed pistol license is one of the most recognized in the nation. Any state that recognizes licenses from other states recognizes Michigan's license. That is in part because there is a lot to go through to get a Michigan license. You have to first get an take 8 hours of training. That training requires covering the use of deadly force and a number of other different things. That training needs to include 3 hours of time on the range. So not only do you have training the use of deadly force, you have training the use of firearm safety, and being a certified instructor myself, I'll tell you that those classes often spend more time focusing on how to not use force, how to avoid using force, than they do on actually using force themselves. After you have that training, it will often cost, most of the time, between $75 and $150. Some classes are more. You then take that training certificate down to your county clerk. You fill out a 1 to 2 page application. You pay a $100 application fee and a $15 fingerprinting fee. The total fee for new applications is $115. That $15 fingerprinting fee is often missed. The clerk will accept your fee. They'll accept your application. They'll read you an oath, and they'll notarize your application right there on the spot. They then take your application, put it into the computer, and you go home. Your information is then sent to the Michigan State Police, who conduct the background check on you. And this, to be clear, is more than just a simple NICS check when you go in to buy a firearm. This is the Michigan State Police looking into your background. They send your fingerprints off to the FBI. The FBI sees, looks at, are your fingerprints in any case somewhere? Have you done anything wrong? You are looked into quite extensively. The Michigan State Police will then report back to the county clerk as to whether or not you have any statutory disqualifier. Michigan is unique here in that we list somewhere around 68, by my last count, misdemeanor disqualifications, where we specifically enumerate these charges, misdemeanors, are disqualifications, in addition to the general stuff, in addition to the felony disqualifiers, in addition to any domestic violence stuff. We list all of those out. And some of them are rather weird. Just to cherry pick one at the moment, providing pornographic material to someone underage is a disqualifier for CPL. Provided you have none of those, you are not currently charged with any of them, or you have not been convicted of one of those misdemeanor disqualifiers in the last 3 or 8 years, depending on which specific one it is. Again, the Michigan State Police report back to the county clerk. Based on what the Michigan State Police says, the county clerk will issue or deny you your license. Well, they will send it to you by mail. This can take anywhere between a week to, I've seen upwards of 2 months. Most of the time, it's done within 45 days, and that is because in 2015, this legislative body added a requirement to the law that says if it's not done in 45 days, your receipt for the license is to be treated as a temporary license until you get that notice of disqualification. The vast, vast majority of time, clerks are able to meet that 45-day window, easily meet that 45-day window. And from there, your license is good to between 4 and 5 years. Not exactly 5 years, between 4 and 5, because it will expire on your birthday, between 4 and 5 years into the future. And then from there, it's good for 5 years and 5 years and 5 years. It again expires on your birthday. So that's what it takes to get a concealed pistol license. We're not the best state. We're not the worst state in terms of what you have to go through and cost that it takes. Once you have your license, you then have to keep it up. In comparing Michigan to other states, in comparing our scheme to other states, there are a few specific things that I would call out. The first is that Michigan treats somebody with an expired license, even if it expired for 5 minutes, as the same as somebody who never had a license in the first place. Most other states don't do that. And then there's a combination of two things here. Michigan casts a very wide net in terms of what we consider a concealed pistol. It is a very wide net. It's anything, the courts have said, that is where it's not readily observable to the average everyday person. We've seen a lot of examples over the past year where somebody's walking down the street and maybe a coat or a shirt just kind of covers a little bit of the firearm, and the police will arrest that person and charge them with the 5-year felony that comes along with carrying a concealed pistol without a license. And that's that second factor. In addition to Michigan's very wide net that we cast, we have a very harsh punishment, one of the most harsh in the nation. It is a 5-year felony. This puts us at more strict than states like California, more strict than states like Illinois, and other states who you would generally think of as not generally friendly to firearms. States usually have only one of those two things. Either they have a very narrow net where they say, we're only going to apply our law specifically to loaded firearms carried concealed on the person, or loaded firearms in the vehicle, where if it's not loaded, we're not going to apply it, or they don't apply it to vehicles at all. Again, Michigan, whether the firearm is loaded or unloaded, whether the firearm is assembled or not assembled, none of that matters. If you have it anywhere in your vehicle, the courts will still allow you to be prosecuted for that felony, even if you have no ammunition, even if your firearm is not assembled, and even if it's where you can't necessarily get to it, but they can still argue to some degree that you can. And in addition to that, there's that 5-year felony. States that do have a wider net, such as Michigan, will generally prosecute the offense as a misdemeanor, not a felony. The combination of those two things has led to numerous problems in the state of Michigan. Now, add to that some of what we're finding ourselves in a unique position today, thanks to the ongoing pandemic. I described to you the process that you have to go to. You have to go to the county clerk. So a county clerk has to process every single application, send it off to the Michigan State Police. To the best of my knowledge, the Michigan State Police is keeping up with the demand just fine. However, a number of county clerks are not. Wayne County specifically. Last I checked, Wayne County is not even offering appointments to apply for your concealed pistol license. They haven't for weeks. They're being sued over that, as well as dragging their feet on the processing itself. In addition to a tremendous backlog of over a year's worth of processing in Wayne County, last I heard, there are over 2,000 open CCW prosecutions in Wayne County, where somebody has carried a pistol, allegedly concealed in some shape, manner, or form. Remember that very wide net that I talked about. And they've been arrested, and they're being prosecuted for that felony. And even after we've been through this pandemic for a year now, the number of cases that they still have outstanding, that they still have yet to go through, is over 2,000 just in that one county alone. Much of that is because the people who want to do this lawfully, the people who want to follow the process that the state has outlined, whether they think it's onerous, whether they think it's easy, they just don't have the option to do so. And so they're forced to make the choice. Do they carry for their own protection and risk criminal punishment that could lead to the loss of numerous rights, not just firearm rights, but many other rights even beyond that? Or do they wait and risk their safety? Once you have your license as well, there are a number of restricted zones that you cannot carry a concealed pistol into. That list of zones is generally on the back of your license to help people remember those zones and what they are. There is some confusion as to those zones and what they apply to. Some people think you can't carry at all in those zones. That's not true. It's been very clear that the list only applies to carrying a concealed pistol. However, if you don't have your CPL, you generally can't carry in those zones at all, which leaves, if you have the license, you're allowed to carry in more places because you've gone through the background check, you've gone through the training. However, you're still restricted in the manner in which you can carry.
Tom, does any member of the committee want to see a concealed pistol license at all? Anybody want to? I've got one. If I know Representative Steenland doesn't need to see it, but
I've got mine for what it's worth. They take your driver's license photo. You used to have to present a passport quality photo. You don't have to do that anymore.
that was my bill. You're welcome. Just kidding.
There was a change where they now take your driver's license photo. Some people like that because it makes it nice and easy. Some people don't like their driver's license photo. It is what it is. And again, the back lists the places where you can't carry a concealed pistol to help those people remember. One thing that is unique to Michigan, not necessarily unique, but it's rare throughout the United States, is that we require anyone with a Michigan license to disclose if they are carrying a concealed pistol immediately when they are stopped. The difference there is states that have any sort of disclosure requirement, most states will do it upon request of the officer, whereas Michigan, it's immediate. What does immediate mean? You use your best judgment in the circumstances you are. I'm going to assume that immediate means something different up in Iron Mountain than it does in Wayne County, depending on the officer involved. But to be clear, that only applies to Michigan CPL holders. It does not apply to anyone from Indiana or Ohio or Wisconsin that is licensed in their state, entering the state of Michigan, and carrying in Michigan with their license from another state. I mentioned that Michigan's license is one of the most recognized in the nation. Somewhere 36, 39 states will recognize Michigan's license. Michigan recognizes every single license in the nation, and we do that by statute. Some states leave it up to the Attorney General. Michigan does not. We have a written statute. If you have a license from your home state, you can carry in Michigan as if you had a license here in Michigan. That gives you a history of where we've come over the years, dating all the way back to 1887. I like to think back then, before automobiles, what it was like back then, and this first law that was passed, and trying to think, why did they pass that? Going into the 1920s and everything that was going on in the 1920s, all through the 60s up to 2000, and in 2008, 2015, we've come a long way. Our laws are now huge. They're very complex. They're much harder to follow now, just because a lot of this stuff from 1927 has still in place, and you're trying to take this section of law that's from 1927, that's interacting with this section of law that's from 2015, and sometimes that can get a little complex, just to be honest, and figure out what does it mean? How does it work together? Even for courts, let alone the public in general. We went through the process, and we went through where Michigan stands today. Oh, one of the things I forgot, Mr. Chair, a couple years ago, we looked across the nation, and we said, let's take Michigan's cost to get a license and compare it to every other state. But we can't just compare the initial cost to get a license because a lot of factors come into play with it when you think of how much does it cost me to have this license. So what we did is we said, how much is it going to cost you to get the license and maintain it for 25 years? That factors in renewal costs. We found that Michigan was the fourth most expensive state in the nation, behind only Washington, D.C., Illinois, and California. And yes, I know Washington, D.C. isn't necessarily a state, but you get it. So out of the 51 states and Washington, D.C., Michigan was the fourth most expensive. I have a graph that my organization has kept since every year the Michigan State Police will put out a report. It says this is how much money they've taken in, the Michigan State Police has taken in. Of that $100 fee or $115 renewal fee that is paid to have your license, the Michigan State Police gets a portion of that. I believe it's 20-something and then 5 more for renewal licenses. It actually might be a little higher than that. I don't quite remember. This past year, if I can find where I have it pulled up. Here we go. In addition to Michigan being the fourth most expensive in the country, this past year, of just the Michigan State Police's portion of those fees, they brought in $11,204,000 in revenue. That is their numbers that they reported. The problem there is if you take the number of applications they said they processed and multiply it by the minimum amount that they said that they can possibly take in per application, they're missing a couple $1 million somewhere in there. So their numbers don't add up. It should be more according to the numbers that, again, they report. But taking their numbers at face value, they reported $11.2 million in revenue. They're also required to report their statutory expenses. I mentioned that part of the process, they're required to run the background check. They're required to do certain things that requires full-time employees, that requires computers and access to systems to do. It's understandable that they have expenses. According to them, the cost to them to do their portion of the process is $2.26 million. That leaves, in the last fiscal year, an $8.9 million profit on just their portion alone. $8.9 million, or a 79.83% profit margin, while thousands of people in the state, thousands of people in Wayne County alone, are prosecuted for a felony for, I'm going to say most of them were not otherwise doing something wrong. That profit margin is up from 77% the year before and 69% the year before that. Their profit since they started reporting in the 2013-2014 fiscal year has more than doubled. Their expenses have barely increased. They've gone from $1.3 million to $2.2 million in expenses, while their revenue has gone from $4.9 million to $11.2 million. Profit is far, far exceeding their expenses. When it comes to the county level, the counties also get a portion of those fees, not including the $15 fingerprinting fee that most counties will take, because the counties at some level will do the fingerprinting. Counties report a wild range of expenses. Some counties report it as low as $5 per license to them. Some counties report as high as $50 per license. We tried to figure it out, and you can't see it now, but I'm try and show you just very quickly. We put a scatter plot of the cost versus the number of licenses that are processed by each county. Because they have to report, here's how many licenses or applications we processed, here's how much we report that each application costs us. Just to see if there's any correlation between the number of licenses they process and the amount of cost per license. For the past 4 years that we've been recording and looking into that amount of data, every year the regression value, the R value, is just slightly over zero. Very, very slightly over zero. What that means is there's no correlation between the two, which is interesting to me. Or if there is any correlation, it's very slightly in the positive, meaning the more licenses that they process, the more it costs them per license, which to me is the opposite of what you'd expect. I would expect counties to be able to take advantage of economies of scale and be more efficient and apply more resources broadly when processing multiple licenses. I can understand a county that perhaps buys an expensive machine. Well, that machine is going to increase the cost of 1,000 applications as opposed to 10,000 applications. And yet, for the last 4 years where we've been recording this data, we've never seen the trend statewide show that counties are more efficient as they process more applications. In addition to that, the vast majority of counties report well under the amount of money that they receive in their portion. Unlike the Michigan State Police, who the portion they get goes into the general fund for the Michigan State Police, and the Michigan State Police can just do whatever they want with the money, counties are restricted on their portion. It goes into a specific fund that they are required to use for concealed pistol license funding. Now, if you look at they're reporting so much per license that's well under what they get, either they're not reporting that number correctly, one option. Two, they should have a very substantial amount in the bank in their fund. Or three, they are illegally spending the money that they're getting. And I can't tell you which one it is for each of the 83 counties. It would depend on each county you'd have to go look at. That should give you an overall of our process here. Again, I've outlined some things that I think are some very broad issues. Discussed the process that we should go through and some of the history. I'm happy to open up to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. Certainly appreciate the overview, and it is incredibly helpful. I've got a couple questions. Number one is and correct me if I'm wrong, and I really don't think that I am, but this is a state where open carrying a firearm is lawful without a permit, so long as you are able to legally purchase a pistol, right?
So long as you're able to legally possess the pistol, yes.
So an individual can go into a public location, open carrying. So let's say a citizen who does not have a concealed pistol license wants to go to their local neighborhood gun store and open carry there, but they have to drive from their house to get to that location. Can you describe how an individual would go about doing that lawfully without a concealed pistol license in this state?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The state requires, in order to lawfully transport a pistol in Michigan, in a vehicle, if you do not have a concealed pistol license, it requires one of two things. Either if you are in a vehicle with a trunk, the firearm must be unloaded in a case designed for the storage of firearms, not just any case, and it must be in the trunk. All three of those things must exist. Otherwise, you're subject to a 5-year felony. If you are in a vehicle that does not have a trunk, and only if you are in a vehicle that does not have a trunk, do you then have another option where the firearm is unloaded in a case designed for the storage of firearms and not readily accessible to the occupants of the vehicle. What does not readily accessible mean? That's up to a jury. Forgive me, Mr. Chair, one of the things I also forgot is that the line as to what is a concealed pistol is very blurry. It can apply to something, I touched on it just very quickly, apply to something where a shirt or coat just barely covers the handle of the firearm. It could apply to, I've seen it where somebody is openly carrying and the prosecutor argued that the holster concealed the firearm. To me, that is an issue when you compare it to the 5-year felony. If we have a very strict requirement, there should be a very bright line, in my humble opinion.
And so somebody who, is trying to follow the law but makes a minor mistake, it's a 5-year felony, and it would basically destroy their ability to ever have a firearm again.
It makes being a productive member of society very hard.
We have a question from Representative Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate your testimony today. You mentioned Wayne County. I represent a portion of western Wayne County, and I just wanted you to get a little more specific and share some information with us. You said the Wayne County clerk was being sued over the lack of timeliness with processing CPL applications. Do you know who specifically? Is it just gun owners that are suing her? Is it a certain group? Is it your organization? And also, do you just attribute this to the COVID pandemic, or do you think there's another reason?
Thank you for the question, Representative Coleman. To be specific, it's 3 named individuals and 3 organizations in the state, including Michigan Open Carry, that I'm a part of. I'll be fully open with you. I'm part of that litigation in terms of working on it and seeing it through. There are numerous complaints in the complaint dealing with not just the slowness in the backlog and the county clerk's failure to address that backlog, but also additional things where for the last 3 to 4 weeks at least, I'm not exactly sure when it started, the county clerk is no longer even accepting appointments for concealed pistol applications. If you go on our website, that just says you have to file, schedule an appointment. There's no option there to even schedule an appointment. There have been a couple hearings at the county level to try and figure out what is going on, and I've watched those hearings. I've listened to what the members of the county clerk's office have said as to why they think they have this backlog, and respectfully, nothing that they've pointed to is any justifiable excuse. They've pointed to things such as, well, we have to buy another fingerprinting machine in order to get people through. Under the law, the county clerk cannot mandate that an applicant get fingerprints by the county clerk. Somebody in Wayne County, if they don't want to get fingerprints by the county clerk, or in some counties, let's say the county sheriff that normally does it is not doing fingerprints at that time, if they wanted to, they could drive all the way up to Iron Mountain and have the Iron Mountain PD do their fingerprints. Don't necessarily suggest that they do that, just highlights that it's an option. So the county clerk seems to think that they can require people to get fingerprints while they submit the application, probably so that they get that $15 fee. It's just my guess. However, such a requirement is unlawful and puts them further in violation of the law. I've heard concerns of space, in terms we don't have enough space to do this. However, everyone I've talked to that has been through there recently says that most of the building is a ghost town and there's plenty of available space should they want to do it. I've heard, this is them during a hearing on the matter in front of the county board, say that it's a matter of training. Forgive me, I don't understand how training is a problem here, as the process is effectively take the application, make sure everything is filled out, have them sign it in front of you while you administer the oath, and then type the information into the Michigan State Police's application that they make available to every county clerk. So if there's more training than that, I would really be interested to see what it is. I've talked with other people that work for county clerks and county clerks themselves, and they have nothing to point to that would say that this is some really esoteric process where we really have to train them for a long time to get it right.
Thank you for the information. I'm going to follow up with our county commissioner and just see if they have any input on the matter.
Thank you,
But I
Representative.
appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom, I want to go back real quick before we get to Vice Chair Beeler. So under current court interpretation of what is a concealed pistol, an individual cannot just put their pistol on the dashboard without a CPL or in the passenger seat. That would be considered concealed?
It's not necessarily considered concealed, Representative. Numerous states will allow you to what's called open carry in a vehicle. Michigan does not, because our law applies to any pistol carried concealed on the person or concealed or otherwise in a vehicle. So whether it's open in a vehicle, whether it's concealed in a vehicle, you need the CPL to possess the firearm in a vehicle.
And so
to
it could
carry
be
it.
on the dashboard, visible to everybody on planet Earth that looks inside the car. That's still a concealed weapon and a 5-year felony if you don't have a pistol CPL.
Again, Representative, it's not necessarily concealed. There's extra stuff that applies when it's concealed, but it is subject to the requirement that you have a CPL. And forgive my hyperbole, but you could have it duct taped to your windshield, and it still applies here. You still need that CPL in order to do that.
Vice Chair Beeler has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I thought it was, very informative. I wonder if you could touch on. I'm a proponent of constitutional carry and the idea of constitutional carry, so very much in favor of a lot of the things you've mentioned. I wonder if you could touch on what is some of the opposition to reforming our approach to concealed carry, because to me, the idea that if someone, is legally able to, it meets the requirements that we all agree are necessary to own a firearm, whether or not they have it under their shirt or above their shirt seems like a very moot point. And to many of the points you brought up, the ramifications for wearing it beneath your shirt are rather steep. And so I wonder if you could just talk about what is the reasonable opposition to someone who would oppose, some of the things that we've talked about legislatively.
Respectfully, Representative, let me just start by saying I am not the proper person to give you that standpoint. I would definitely defer to those who advocate that themselves. I don't want to make it seem at all like I can adequately answer that question. From what I've heard, it has to deal with if we don't have people go through this licensing process, then anyone can have a firearm. My retort to that is, well, those who wish to break the law already break the law here in Michigan. The laws that we've had in place since 1927 or even 1887 doesn't seem to be stopping them. I don't understand what this fee or tax, as some people have called it, I don't see how that changes anything, at least insofar as somebody who's not already prohibited from possessing firearms. And even though my organization is a huge proponent of open carry, we also are very supportive of concealed carry as well, and we very much agree that a very thin layer of fabric over a firearm does not make the firearm or the person more dangerous.
Thank you. And just following up briefly, you had also talked a little bit about some of the, I guess, legal ramifications. What do you think? In my mind, those legal ramifications are perhaps too steep. Is there an appetite? Perhaps have other states done some reform there? I guess how does Michigan compare on the enforcement side of this issue?
Could you clarify your question, if I may?
Yeah, the question is, how does Michigan compare in penalties to other states across the country, simply?
We're one of the most strict by far. Again, not just in the penalties themselves, but if you add in the scope of the net as well, we become one of the absolute most strict in the nation when you combine those two things. And let me ask before I even go in here, are you looking for a proposed policy solution? I don't want to dive into that unless I'm specifically asked.
No, I think that it's always, in many of the policies that come before this committee and others, we talk about how Michigan compares to other states, not because we seek to copy them, but really just as a comparison. And I think it's always just refreshing to hear where Michigan stands compared to neighbors who face similar issues to us. So that answers my question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Tom, if you wouldn't mind just waiting just for 1 second, we'll get back to you, but we have some procedural motions to make. I will now take a motion from any representative. Beeler, to refer House Bill 4078 to the Committee on Judiciary with recommendation that the bill pass. Mr. Clerk, call the roll. Just for the benefit of the members, this is the Guns on Four-Wheelers bill.
On the motion to refer House Bill 4078 to the Committee on Judiciary, Chair LaFave.
Yes.
Representatives Beeler.
Yes.
Eisen.
Yes.
Bazat.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Coleman.
Yes.
Rogers.
Yes.
Steenland.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 9 yeas, no nays, no pass. The motion prevails.
House Bill 4078 is referred to the Committee on Judiciary with the recommendation that the bill pass. Are there further questions from Mr. Lambert? Tom, do you have any closing remarks?
Just very much, I want to thank everyone for your time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your questions. Again, for the opportunity to come before you and present this information. It's just a personal interest to me, just in how it works, let alone the policy.
Well, Tom, I've been able to work with you over the last couple of years, and I know that Tom is very open to discussing any form of legislation that you may be contemplating that his organization may have interest in. I know if you wouldn't mind just sending an email to all the members of the committee with some contact information, and whether or not you agree with the tenets of the organization that he represents, there is not anybody who'll be more happy to talk with you about legislation, amendments, bills, or just generalities on this subject as Tom and his organization.
And to be clear, I've worked with many representatives on both sides of the issue, both sides of the aisle. One of the first bills I worked on was introduced by Representative Brandon Dillon. So, thank you for your time.
At this time, I believe on Zoom, or at least electronically in some form, we have Steve Doolin from the Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners. Steve, are you with us?
I am. Thank you.
I'll tell you what, I mean, Michigan's a great place, but it doesn't look quite as pretty as that does right now. I take it
It's
that's a
fake.
virtual background.
It's fake. Luckily, the judge I was before this morning appreciates it, so I didn't have to take it down.
Well, thank
And
you for.
I apologize for showing up late. I'm sorry I missed Mr. Lambert. He's very knowledgeable, and we're on the same side of almost everything. But I was in court. I'm a practicing attorney, and court ran late.
Yeah, no apologies to us. I don't want to get you in trouble with the judge. They got a lot more power than I do. So go ahead and testify. Just so you know, we have about 15 minutes in total.
Okay.
Mr. Clerk, are we procedurally good to go? Okay, so we have 15 minutes before a hard stop.
Got it. I'll be brief and focused. My name is Steve Doolin. I am a member of the board of directors of the Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners. I am the professor of firearms law at Cooley Law School and have been for, I don't know, about 18 years or so. I am an attorney in private practice in East Lansing, and I do firearm cases all over the state. I've been speaking on one particular issue for any chance I could get for quite some time. In fact, a couple of years ago, I brought it up with CDAM, the Council of Defense Attorneys in Michigan, and that is our really extreme draconian penalty for carrying a concealed pistol on an expired license. What happens is an individual goes from absolutely lawful carrying concealed to a 5-year felony the day after that license expires. There's really no grace period. There's no lesser offense. In fact, as Mr. Lambert mentioned just a few minutes ago, Michigan is among the most severe penalties across the states for carrying a concealed weapon in general, just that charge. And so if, you know, by the way, our board is on record favoring constitutional carry. And I would love it if Michigan could join the approximately 20 other states that have that in place. But if we have to take some lesser step, I think even some of the folks who are on the opposite side of this issue from me might agree that going from a lawful situation where you've got a person who's been background checked and has been carrying for 5 years, because the licenses run for about 5 years, depending on birthdays. And then suddenly saying that same person the very next day is committing a 5-year felony is a little extreme. And what's happening, a lot of prosecutors and judges are recognizing that that's extreme and have recognized it. So they're sort of crafting rough justice in the courts by taking guilty pleas to lesser offenses, some of which have no connection at all to the facts of the case. And in my opinion, that's an awful thing for law in general. It erodes respect for the law when you've got a person who's pleading guilty to something that he or she certainly didn't do in an effort to avoid a 5-year felony. simply because a license expired. That's the current situation. And I'm trying to stay focused, so I'll try not to get started on some of my other pet peeves, but I'm happy to take any questions.
You got plenty of time. Members, do you have any questions at this time? Feel free to keep going, sir.
Okay. So if there's some, you know,
I
what
lied.
I've
We
looked at
actually
other
do have a
states.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I lied. We do actually have a question. Representative Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The counties still send out about a 6 months notice, correct, for renewing. You know, I know my county does. So a lot of it is, it's too bad that they get caught with that expired license, but still, the counties do try to alleviate that by giving you a 6 months heads up on your renewal, just to make that clear. Thank you.
And if I could respond, sure. Most of the 83 counties do that most of the time. And what I've heard from a couple of clients is that the 6 months is too long for a person with a busy life, in the sense that they kind of get the notice, they think they have to deal with it, but they have plenty of time, and then that time goes by. And of course, you know, we're all aware that the Postal Service is far from perfect. But even with the notice, I think that treating it as a 5-year felony is a little extreme, personal opinion. Any other questions?
Not seeing any at this time.
Okay, if I could plow forward a little bit, we've got some other issues that are COVID related, and one of the big ones is there's currently a lawsuit pending with, as plaintiffs, Michigan Open Carry, which is Tom's group, Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Owners, which is my group, and another group called Michigan Gun Owners. We've got together and sued the clerk of Wayne County for cessation of all processing of concealed pistol license applications. And we just found out that one of the other counties basically shut down the entire county clerk's office for a week or two because of COVID. And so if there's any opportunity for introduction of a bill that would take away the requirement that the CPL application be signed at the clerk's office and allow for electronic renewals and electronic applications for concealed pistol licenses in some way, I think that would go a long way toward alleviating this. No one knows how long this COVID is going to go on, or whether there will be some other pandemic in the future. But I believe that's the basis, at least the purported or ostensible basis for some of these issues that are arising in county clerk's offices. It's the fact that the statute as of right now and the procedure requires in-person signing of the application in front of an employee of the clerk's office. And there's got to be a way to do that electronically, even if it's via Zoom or something. I don't have the technological background to sort that out, but they can do almost everything else online, but we can't do our concealed pistol license applications online. We have to be in person for that.
To that point, there is a public notary online bill that I don't remember at the top of my head if we moved it in the waning days of the last legislature or if it's in the process of being moved now. But it's possible that legislation may be able to be beneficial in that area, or otherwise, I know there's a couple members of this committee that would probably be interested in looking at that specifically. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of things that can be ironed out short of full-on constitutional carry, because while I have hopes, I've been told by the folks in our organization who are much more sort of politically savvy than I tend to be a law and policy wonk, but the political folks in our group tell me that I'm not going to get my dream of constitutional carry anytime soon.
We do have a question from Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said you're in court this morning. Taking an oath, I know for the CPL, they have to take an oath in front of the clerk. Is that one of the reasons it's not done online?
I'm not sure, but notaries can give oaths too. So if we allowed for a notarized form to be scanned and uploaded, for example, or we allowed for a Zoom, the way I'm appearing here right now, we allowed for a Zoom oath. Either way, I think would go a long way toward resolving this.
Well, and to be clear, one of our members of the Supreme Court has been ruling on cases from Dubai for the last 3 months. So I'm not sure that people needing to get their CPL should have to necessarily go into the clerk's office when the Supreme Court's not even on this continent. Any other questions at this time? We got another 5 minutes, sir.
Okay, that's dangerous to give me extra time. I really do want to stay focused, and I think that the goal is, at least from our organization's perspective, is constitutional carry, and we're at something like 25 or 30,000 dues-paying members as of right now, and concealed pistol licensees are closing in on 750,000 in the state of Michigan. So we're a significant proportion of the citizenry. By the end of this calendar year, we should be about 1 in 9 adults having concealed pistol licenses. And if you take out the institutionalized folks and folks who are otherwise disqualified, it's not out of line to guess that by the end of this year, we'll be at about 1 in 8 eligible adults will have concealed pistol licenses. So even if we can't get to constitutional carry, which would save everybody a ton of time and money, these are two things I think that could be done to make the current system more rational. And that's really one of my major complaints about the fact that we don't have anything else available than a 5-year felony for carrying a concealed weapon. In fact, members may be aware that just a few days ago, the Wayne County prosecutor, Kim Worthy, went on the record in one of the papers saying that she's got about 2,000 pending CCW cases in Wayne County alone. And they're essentially being treated as a low-level offense, and they're going to try to clear them off the docket so that they can focus on more serious crimes. And I think that's right. I think that's correct. I don't always agree with Ms. Worthy, but in this case, I think she got it right. It is a fairly low-level offense compared to much more serious violent crimes, but it carries a penalty of 5 years in prison simply for concealing the pistol. I really do think that's disproportionate. I think it's jamming up our court system in a difficult time. I think that this is something that even some of the folks who probably don't like concealed carry could admit is disproportionate compared to other crimes and compared to the population we're dealing with. I'm really fond of repeating that Michigan concealed pistol licensees are among the most law-abiding portion of the state population. We've got about 20 years of data right now, and CPL holders are literally 10 times more law-abiding than the general population. So even if it's just some kind of a renewal reform where there's maybe a civil infraction for carrying on an expired license for at least some period of time, assuming the person's not otherwise disqualified, I think that goes a long way toward injecting some reason and some rationality into the system. And I'll shut up now so you can get on with your business.
I've got 2 questions, and I know members would like to proceed with the rest of their day. I appreciate everybody's taken almost a full hour today for this important discussion. So let's go into the land of hypothetical, which I know can be dangerous. So if you don't feel comfortable answering the question, don't. But if, let's say, hypothetically, constitutional carry were to be passed, meaning that it is no longer required to get a license to conceal carry a pistol, and an individual decided to use that pistol concealed and commit a crime, such as bank robbery, what would happen? Would that gun violation, I know the answer to this, but the gun violation would still be a crime as well as the underlying offense if they have a CPL or if constitutional carry is passed, right?
Right. We've still got on the books the sentence enhancer called felony firearms, which is a 2-year additional charge for commission of any felony while in possession of a firearm. So to the extent that that does serve as a deterrent, and I think that's debatable, that still exists separate from the concealed pistol licensing scheme.
And you don't even need to use the firearm in the commission of the crime. It just needs to be simple possession, right? So, not a good example because DUI is not a good thing and people should not be driving under the influence. But let's say an individual is driving under the influence for the third time, happens to have a vehicle, a weapon in the vehicle. Now it's a felony DUI and they get the 2-year enhancement on top of it, even if they have a CPL, or even if the pistol was nowhere, you know, they certainly weren't using the gun to drive the car drunk. Is that accurate?
I think there might be some case law that mollifies that slightly, but I don't have a brief in front of me. So I'll agree with you with some reservations that I'd like to write a memo on that.
Well, I hope that's not the case because that is ridiculous. But and then what about an individual who has a concealed pistol license and it is completely active? They obviously passed the background checks, they paid their fees, they got their fingerprints, and then let's say Vice Chair Beeler, for example, is the person with a CPL, and he's arrested for robbing a train. What happens to his CPL and his ability to carry concealed? To be clear, I don't believe that Rep. Beeler has ever been accused of that crime, but not yet.
Well, as of right now, on a charge, there doesn't have to be a conviction, but on a charge of a disqualifying crime, an individual CPL is immediately suspended. And the license itself, the wallet card, has to be surrendered during that time if the prosecutor asks for it, the county clerk asks for it back. So there's an instant and automatic revocation of the license. But I think the bigger picture here, and I think if I could answer a question that was actually asked of Mr. Lambert right when I was logging in, you know, why do the folks who don't like constitutional carry or don't like us carrying guns? I honestly believe, and I think that there's some really good people, I know some really good people who have good intentions who are on the opposite side of this debate from me. But I think they honestly believe that by passing a law, it will change behavior. And I no longer believe that after almost 20 years of reading and writing and speaking and teaching on this issue. I believe that the only people who follow our gun control laws are law-abiding people to begin with. I don't believe that the folks who we are the most afraid of are following the law at all. Most of violent crime comes from recidivism, and most of those recidivists simply don't care if they add one more felony to the list of whatever felony they're planning to commit that day, whatever the list is. Whether it's drugs or violent crime, putting the gun in their pocket when they go do what they do is the least of their worries because they don't think they're going to get caught. Whereas we've got a lot of traps out there, a lot of Kafka traps, to reference the author who wrote about a bizarre trial. We've got a lot of Kafka traps out there for law-abiding citizens, and it creates a lot of stress for people who are certainly no threat because our law is Byzantine and complex.
We have about 90 seconds, and I have two very quick questions. I want to talk about immediate disclosure. So the statute requires that a Michigan CPL holder must immediately disclose to an officer that they are in possession of a pistol with a CPL when they have an interaction with law enforcement. Is that about accurate?
That is, and I was involved in a case several years back where the trial judge ruled that 40 seconds from the officer getting to the window to the disclosure was not immediate as required by the statute, that 40 seconds is too long.
So it is unlawful not to follow the commands of an officer in this state. And it is also a requirement that an individual essentially interrupt an officer, fail to comply with the request for license, registration, and proof of insurance upon request, to immediately disclose that they have a CPL. And my understanding is that a court, not a high court, but a local court, ruled that when an officer asked for license, registration, proof of insurance. A CPL holder produced the documentation that was asked of by the officer, and a concealed pistol license. And they were cited for non-immediate disclosure.
Correct. In fact, that's the same case I was referring to with the 40-second time frame from the dash cam. The court ruled that handing the CPL over is not disclosure as required under the statute, because the officer then had a question. Well, you have the license. Do you also have a pistol? And so that's another sort of Kafka trap. And there are trainers out there who are training people to not use the word gun when interacting with an officer during a traffic stop, because that's an alarm word that many departments train their officers to yell to one another when the bad guy pulls a gun. And so people get a little nervous and they're not sure how they're going to phrase their disclosure. And it does lead to further issues for otherwise law-abiding people. Maybe they were speeding, whatever, got them pulled over, expired tag or something.
Steve, thank you very much for your time today. But for a statement by Representative Eisen, we are out of time. Representative Eisen.
I just want to let everybody know that I do have a blue back, addressing that issue exactly. You do not have to give your CPL unless he asks for it, just like a driver's license and stuff like that. So that's in the working right now, and hopefully I'll be dropping that soon. So just let you know.
Representative Eisen, thank you for that statement and that bill. Any other member personal privilege before we adjourn? Seeing no further questions and no member privilege, I want to thank members of this committee for taking the time today, and we are adjourned.